RFK and Trump did an announcement. Trump called the biggest medical announcement in American history, and it turned out to be a little underwhelming. For most of it, Trump spoke. He capped off both ends of it, and it was a sandwich of maniacs in the middle, and then back to Trump. I watched it. I watched the entire thing. I figured I would describe what happens to you and sort of talk about it, give my opinion. When Trump first gets up there, he says that scientists, or he implies that scientists hid the cause of autism.
And we actually met in my office, is it like 20 years ago, Bobby? It's probably 20 years ago in New York. I was a developer, as you probably heard, and I always had very strong feelings about autism and how it happened and where it came from. And he and I don't know, the word got out, and I wouldn't say that people were very understanding of where we were, but it's turning out that we understood a lot more than a lot of people who studied it, we think. And I say we think because I don't think they were really letting the public know what they knew.
He basically says something like, we think that they knew, but they didn't report it, or something like that. And then he throws out this number that keeps getting smaller as he talks about it. So if you watch the video, it's ridiculous how he starts at 1 out of 35, and by the end of it, he's going to 1 out of 10. But he says that 1 out of every 10,000 kids used to be autistic, and that spiked up in like a few years.
Just a few decades ago, 1 in 10,000 children had autism. So that's not a long time. And I've always heard, they say a few, but I think it's a lot less time than that. It used to be 1 in 20,000, then 1 in 10,000. And I would say that's probably 18 years ago. And now it's 1 in 31. But in some areas, it's much worse than that, if you can believe it, 1 in 31. And I gave numbers yesterday. For boys, it's 1 in 12. I was told that's in California, where they have, for some reason, a more severe problem.
But that 10,000 number is not accurate. And if it is an accurate number he's referring to, it would be something like 1 in 5,000 or 1 in 20,000. I can't remember. But by the time 90s and 80s rolled around, it was like 1 in 100 or something like that. So the difference isn't that high. It's not as drastic as he says it is, of course, because he's a fucking liar and he lies constantly. And he's throwing out lots of numbers to be sort of like a number, like mentalist, trying to get in people's heads and make them fucking balance all of these things at once. And I think for a lot of people, it works clearly because he's our president and people worship him, even if he fucking lies constantly. It's like an expression of his power. He said something about how we should be grateful for them. And then he says that there are some groups who don't experience autism, and RFK sort of butts in to tell him that the Amish are the ones who don't have autism, and it's because they don't take acetaminophen or do vaccines, basically.
Is that a correct statement, by the way?
There are some studies that suggest that, with the Amish, for example.
The Amish, yeah, virtually. I heard none. See, Bobby wants to be very careful with what he says, and he should, but I'm not so careful with what I say.
And the announcement is about acetaminophen or Tylenol, but the funny thing is it's also very anti-vaccine. I mean, funny, I guess. Not really funny, but funny. Yeah, so he's talking a lot of the time about how you shouldn't get all of your vaccines at the same time if you're a baby, and that they take all of this medicine out of a vat and they give it to a baby like a horse.
And they pump so much stuff into those beautiful little babies. It's a disgrace. I don't see it. I think it's very bad. They're pumping, it looks like they're pumping into a horse. You have a little fragile child, and you get a vat of 80 different vaccines, I guess, 80 different blends, and they pump it in.
And it's a very strained use of evocative, like, picture language, illustrative language. Like, it's a failure, and it feels very I don't know, it feels very old fashioned. I'll say that. But then he says that pregnant women should tough out fevers. And the problem with that is that a fever is much more dangerous than autism for a child. A fever can give you like pretty major brain damage, but also it can cause miscarriages. Tylenol, if you've ever had a kid, is the one pain medication that you can take as a woman. Not only is it the one pain medication you can take, it's also the one thing most people can take to take down fevers if they have a bad infection. And those infections are much more dangerous than autism. Yeah, like even the worst case scenario, autism is better than your child dying. But even so, they've done lots of tests. Like I'm talking tests of over 1 million kids who are siblings, and one is given acetaminophen in utero and one isn't, and it shows no correlation between the two, versus a couple of studies that they mentioned in the meeting, which is like one that uses a sample of like 8,000 kids, and it's just really bad, shitty sampling. But at the same time, there's a weird little guy there, and he talks about how some studies are shitty, but they're the ones citing shitty studies, not the scientists who study medicine. RFK compares autism to cancer, to lung cancer, and how it needs to be caused by cigarettes. So therefore, autism needs to be caused by something, and it's ridiculous.
Historically, NIH has focused almost solely on politically safe and entirely fruitless research about the genetic drivers of autism. And that would be like studying the genetic drivers of lung cancer without looking at cigarettes. And that's what NIH has been doing for 20 years.
They're basically coming out and just saying none of the established science for autism is true, which, if we know anything about these people, they are not doctors. Trump is not a doctor. Even if he claims that him and RFK talked about autism back in the 90s, they weren't doctors. Trump is a real estate guy, and RFK Jr. is a lawyer. They are not doctors. One is good at selling you things, and the other is good at making arguments, because one is a lawyer and the other one is a real estate guy. But they even mention that Tylenol is the only pain option for women at 14 minutes in, and RFK says that they're replacing politicized science because they're like afraid for this answer. But there's nothing woke about not thinking Tylenol causes autism, except for maybe the fact that it's true. And if you believe in the truth nowadays, that's considered being woke. Bhattacharya gets on there and he talks about exposomics and using AI machine learning to solve these problems. He says that it's taboo to ask questions. They're just throwing a bunch of whole bullshit out there. And I mean, the average person doesn't understand medicine, and it's really easy to throw some garbage out there and for it to work. But the fact is that these people are lying, intentionally lying. The weird little guy that I mentioned earlier that said some studies were shitty, he also calls treating fevers reactionary, and it then immediately does a conservative appeal to nature by saying fevers are natural and they're meant to burn out diseases. Like the whole point is if you get a virus, you get a fever and it kills it.
And honestly, there's been this perfunctory, reactionary, mindless practice in medicine. I learned it in medical school and residency. Just treat all fevers. Low-grade fevers, treat them with acetaminophen. Why? What are we doing? A study out of Hopkins actually showed that treating a fever can prolong the duration of illness in a young kid. Maybe that's because a fever is a body's natural way of ridding an infection.
So Dr. Oz claims that interagency cooperation is how the results came back so quick. He calls it an autism crisis. And then he mentions using leucovorin as a treatment for autism, which is it's like a fucking vitamin supplement, which of course, and will be covered by Medicaid. I mean, a lot of people probably made a lot of money during COVID when they were selling the horse dewormer as a COVID cure. So then Dr. Oz calls to start collecting data on patients, sort of like as a study to see like if the leucovorin is working or something.
How are we going to collect clinical data to answer the big questions that the President's asking and the Secretary insists that we offer? CMS is also issuing guidance to convene states and existing research networks to support NIH and FDA in their research efforts of prescription leucovorin, while also maintaining the privacy of all patients, all health information of our beneficiaries. Collecting real-world data, which is what many of you have been asking us to do.
Which it's like, if this is self-reported stuff from people who are taking it or giving it to their kids as a way to cure something that's incurable, I would think that the answers and the reporting would be biased and inaccurate. I'm not a scientist, though. And then he calls it he says that they're going to develop the first treatment pathway for autism. And it's interesting to call it a pathway because a pathway feels like it's going somewhere as opposed to treating symptoms, as if they're going to cure or reduce autism. But autism is a neurological condition to do with the wiring of your brain. And a vitamin isn't going to rewire your brain, stuff that was done when you were like 18 months old. Like it's like synapse pruning and the failure of your brain to do that while you're developing to do that causes autism. It's not something you can just take a drug for and fix. And there's going to be a lot of like fake fantasy science floating around about this now. And I just recommend people to look up a real autism doctor and not someone who hawks supplements like Dr. Oz. And if that autism doctor says something different than a different autism doctor, find out who is in the majority of autism doctors, not in the majority of the public opinion, but the majority of autism doctors. If you really want to know the truth, look at the majority of people in a specific field's opinion. Like the main opinion of the people in a field is usually the right one because most of them agree on it and they study it the most. And then, of course, Dr. Oz ends his thing by calling Trump brave and praising him for doing this. And then they bring on a pediatrician and a mom, but I don't think the mom part's connected to her being a pediatrician. And she heaps praise and appeals to parents. And she does this Mott and Bailey where she talks about how medications have side effects, implying that it isn't unreasonable to think the side effect of Tylenol is autism, which those are different arguments. Medications cause side effects is one argument. It is a true argument. Therefore, Tylenol causes autism. That's where you're making a reach. So the first parent says that the spectrum isn't useful, and instead she opts for the term profound autism, which is pretty vague, and it makes more sense to use a scale that's already developed by scientists because your kid is on it and you don't have to use a vague term like profound autism. I mean, of course, we could all deem that means like level 3 autism, but it's like a very old-timey way of talking about like mental illnesses. Instead of like being able to accurately categorize it, you're using like a emotional modifier, which is profound. And then she complains about how she can't discipline him, and then she praises Trump. The next parent, she's a parent of a high-functioning autistic child who was nonverbal when they were young, which is a lot like my daughter. And then she praises Trump and then praises him some more. Just doesn't really say anything other than like, thank you, Trump, for doing this. Not really much of a relating of her experiences as a parent, but what do you say? And then Trump comes back and he says, don't take Tylenol under any circumstances, and split up your shots.
And they've all just wanted somebody to listen, to not ridicule them or look at them like they were the crazy people. It's hard when you don't have doctors that take the time to really listen and find out when the change happened and what change happened. And it's just, I've been praying for this day for 9 years, and I'm so thankful to God for bringing the administration into our lives. And I'm speechless. This day is a day I never thought would happen. I thought that we would never have an administration that was courageous enough to look into things that no prior administration had. So I'm just here to express my gratitude, and I am looking forward to what comes from this, and hopefully we just get more answers. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So I just want to say acetaminophen is basically Tylenol, essentially, because I noticed that term is used throughout this conference. So it's essentially Tylenol. And I just recommend strongly that you don't use Tylenol unless it's absolutely necessary. I understand it's maybe 10% of the women that are pregnant are, would perhaps be forced to use it. And that would mean you just can't tough it out. No matter what you do, you can't tough it out. So that's up to you and your doctor. But there's a very strong recommendation, maybe stronger from me than from the group, because they're waiting for certain studies. I just want to say, I want to say it like it is. Don't take Tylenol. Don't take it. If you just can't, it's just fight like hell not to take it. There may be a point where you have to, and that you have to work out with yourself. So don't take Tylenol. Other things that we recommend, or certainly I do anyway, is, and it's so important to me to see the doctor 4 times or 5 times for a vaccine. Don't let them pump your baby up with the largest pile of stuff you've ever seen in your life going into the delicate little body of a baby.
He says that they're taking mercury and aluminum out of the vaccines, and I'm pretty sure they already did that a long time ago. So aluminum is not used in vaccines. Thimerosal is the mercury, and they don't use that anymore. Fact, thimerosal was taken out of childhood vaccines in the United States in 2001. So no aluminum and no mercury, but he says we're going to take it out. So now if he wants, he could be like, we took out the mercury and the aluminum and it got rid of all the autism. Or he could say anything about it. He could extrapolate any way he wants, and the people who listen to him will believe anything he says. He says a funny line where he expresses that people will eventually find him to be wrong, but maybe he could be right. That's very funny. I will play it for you.
And I feel very certain, and I know I'll be criticized. Someday they'll look back and they'll say, well, it wasn't, but I think it will. I think we're going to have a tremendous, this is the most important thing. There's nothing more important than me.
And then when one of the reporters asks if the reason for the amount of autism diagnoses is because of changing standards for evaluation and diagnosing, RFK says, no, it's not something that happened because of diagnostic criteria, because there are no adults with full-blown autism. And he says full-blown autism, which is another example of this like emotional, non-medical term. Full-blown autism, that's like not how you would say that. And he's saying like he doesn't know of any adults with level 3 autism, but that is ridiculous. First of all, like, I don't know if he personally knows anybody with level 3 autism, but there are clearly adults who have level 3 autism, and the ones who would be 60 to 90 years old, maybe a lot of them probably didn't live long. A lot of them were in a time where they were being like abused and kept in mental asylums and a lot of stuff like that. I don't think there was a culture of diagnosing people, and nor was it normal to sort of recognize neurodiversity in the first place. It's like a lot of people were declared just mad or crazy or delirious, and a lot of the time that could have been autism. We don't know because we didn't have the standards of medicine we do now. So obviously he's using that to leverage people's ignorance against them, and apparently it works. And then they lie about the Build Back Better bill, and not the Build Back Better, the Big Beautiful Bill. I hate that they named it like they did that to troll, of course, but they did it BBB, just like Build Back Better, the bill that was an infrastructure bill that they shot down, and we had to get the American Inflation Reduction Act or something instead, which was like a really watered down version of it. And the reporters try to correct them, but they just don't give a fuck, and they never gave a fuck. It's a dual purpose because it serves to sow confusion, and it also emboldens their constituents. But not only does it embolden them, but it makes them have leverage in their personal lives where they can come to people who who've deemed them as like conspiracy theorists and wackos, and they could be like, oh, I was right this whole time. The president's saying what I'm saying. The Health and Human Services Director is saying what I'm saying. The fucking every single person in government agrees with me right now. So maybe you should start agreeing with me. And I mean, that's a big part of why they're using it and why they're leveraging just blatant medical information against us.
I had a woman who worked for me, a beautiful, wonderful woman, worked in Trump Tower, and she had the most perfect child, beautiful, just perfect. And I remember this little blonde-haired boy running around the lobby of Trump Tower, so healthy and so vibrant. And I said, that's great. And one day I came in and she was crying her eyes out behind the counter. She worked at the front desk. She was crying her eyes out. I've never, as much as I've ever seen anyone distraught, she was. I said, are you okay? What happened? My boy, I've lost my boy. What does that mean, your boy? My boy, you know him, sir. You've seen him grow up. He was so beautiful. And I took him for a vaccine, sir. And he developed this unbelievable, I think she said 107, 108. You know, it goes well beyond when this happens. It goes up to 106, 107, 108. You know, we hear 105 and you're in trouble, but it just goes up to a level that you never hear about, but it goes up very high. And it's fried. They get fried. She said, I took him, he developed an unbelievable temperature. And I've lost him, sir. He's gone. And then I saw the boy. It was so tragic to see. That was the following day. After the vaccine. And I've seen it 2 other times, and I think 3 other times, but 2 other times, where they go to the doctor and they get the vaccine, they get the shot. The kid is, badly hurt. Let's be nice, badly hurt.